I'd like John Hopkins and Robert Pollack to come up, please. John Hopkins was the chair of the Charter Review Committee. He will have 15 minutes to introduce the charter amendments and explain how to move forward. Robert Pollack, president of LAWRE, the Los Alamos Governmental Review Initiative, will then have 15 minutes to explain why he opposes the amendments. Following the two presentations, we'll have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So, John.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to briefly explain our rationale and recommendations regarding the initiative, referendum, recall, and charter amendment processes. These are the 4 charter amendments on the November ballot. First, I want to turn to the rationale. I want to focus my remarks on what I view as the main points, the issues of checks and balances. We have a representative form of government with a county council elected to be the top legislative body in the community. However, citizens should have an ultimate safety valve to address either council inaction or council action seriously at odds with the wishes of the community. This safety valve takes the form of a petition signed by at least a minimum number of voters to require council to have an election on the issue. This is called direct legislation or direct democracy and provides the checks and balances. This option is a safety valve and not a routine method for objecting to council decisions. This is where balance comes in. It involves a balance between the citizens' right to direct legislation and council's responsibilities as the top legislative body as articulated in state law. In short, direct legislation should not be too easy and it should not be too hard. Making the petition process too easy results in all checks and no balance. Making the petition process too hard results in no checks and no balance. I'll talk about our recommendations for the proper balance in a few moments. But next, note that recall is really a moot point. We're bound by the state constitution to follow the law as it pertains to counties. This is the view of our attorneys and of the New Mexico Attorney General. All we're doing here is making our charter consistent with state law. Now I want to talk a little bit about the objectives regarding the November ballot and the question of log rolling. Remember, log rolling is where 2 or more unrelated subjects are combined into a single question. This is not allowed. Now I want to emphasize that council's proposed amendments do not constitute log rolling. And I'll explain why. The first thing to note is the whereas language in each of the council's ordinances that says, and I quote, "Whereas council's intent is to replace all parts of the existing charter pertaining to initiative with a single unified system embodied within individual sections of the charter," unquote. This applies equally to the other 3 amendments. Just replace initiative with referendum, recall, or charter amendments. The existing charter is fractured, with various essential provisions appearing in scattered sections, many of which are ambiguous. The CRC, Charter Review Committee, and Council wanted to combine, consolidate, and clarify all those provisions relating to each procedure. This is a key point. Next, note again the log rolling prohibition language, stating in a bit more detail that amendments or subjects should be separated if they are not dependent upon each other, and there is no direct, necessary, or logical connection between the operations of each. All of the proposed amendments for each procedure are directly and logically connected to each other. This type of unified procedure and ballot measure is absolutely consistent with that which was used in the constitutional amendment for judicial reform that was upheld by the New Mexico Supreme Court Chavez case, wherein the court stated that the proposed changes, and I'll quote from the Supreme Court decision, were germane to the overarching theme of judicial reform. Now I will address the recommended levels of checks and balances. The Charter Review Committee reviewed other New Mexico communities and made recommendations in line with their charters. Theirs, however, are based upon municipal rather than general elections. In most of the New Mexico communities, the turnout in municipal elections is substantially less than for general elections. But that may not be the case for Los Alamos, where the turnout for the municipal elections of councilors might well be high. No one knows the answer to this. In any case, I think that the interest in local issues is higher in Los Alamos than in most or all of the other communities of the state. But also, the other communities often have a much higher bar for petitioners to hurdle. For example, we proposed signatures from 15% of the voters in the last general election, while Albuquerque requires signatures from 20% of the voters in the last municipal election. And Santa Fe requires a whopping 33.3% of voters in the last mayoral election, with the additional requirement of 10% from each district. For more details on the other communities, we have a handout at the back called Frequently Asked Questions, and that has the numbers for both Albuquerque and Santa Fe for referendum and initiative. And you can also contact our website, which is listed back there as well, or ask one of our colleagues managing a booth at the farmers market between now and Election Day. By the way, one of the things I thought I'd mention about the sample ballot, which you find back there, is the reason for the 4 amendments is not because there wasn't room on the ballot. I want to mention a few other details. One objection raised by our opponents is that the proposed amendments listed subjects that are not permitted by the petition process. I would like to point out that the present charter lists the same subjects. There are no new exclusions. We just included the list to save a petitioner time and energy by warning him or her ahead of time away from areas that were not amenable to the petition process. And that was the reason for putting them in the original charter. This in no way further restricts the petitioner. A second complex area involves the legislative or policy subjects and the administrative or operational subjects. In general, legislative subjects are amenable to petitions, while administrative subjects are not, the operational subjects. Once you start building a building, in other words, it's not available for the petition process. Now to shift gears. One letter writer said that if you don't understand it, vote no. That is not the league way. If you don't understand it, just ask. In conclusion, I want to say that I feel strongly that we have proposed 4 charter amendments that constitute substantial improvements over the present charter, and I urge you to vote for all 4. Thank you.